Night. Welcome to the September 28th, 2020 Finance Committee meeting. Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, I'd like to excuse Mrs. Bobbitt from the Finance Committee meeting.
I second that, so all in favor?
Aye.
I'm in.
Oh, I can't say
Melody
that.
is excused. Hope she feels sorry.
Only from the first meeting, not the second one yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah, not the second one.
No, I hear you.
Okay.
Think about whether we'll let her out of the second one.
Yeah. So, we'll start with, temporary resolution 100-20. This is a resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to waive the request for qualifications and negotiated contract for planning and design of the expansion of the Upper Hocking Water Pollution Control Facility and related sewers and pump stations, and to declare an emergency. It is coming through Water Pollution Control. Mr. James.
Yes, I'd like to yield some time to Denise Cruz for a little explanation on this.
Good evening. We've been looking at our capacities both on the water and the wastewater side, and the Upper Hocking is designed for 2 million gallons a day, and we're currently treating about 1.88 million gallons a day, so it's time for us to start looking at capacity increases out there. The plant is designed to increase in 2 MGD segments, so when we built the original plant, we planned for 3 expansions. This would be the first expansion. In looking at this, to go through an RFQ process would take approximately 3 months. That's just the way the process works. We put a RFQ out for some sewer work in July, and we're just getting to negotiating the contract now. So it's a long process. In reality, because of the design of the Upper Hocking, because it was designed to be expanded, because of the unique treatment process out there, it really doesn't make sense to go with somebody other than Arcadis. They've always worked well with us. They've always been fair with us. So we would just like to waive the RFQ process so we can negotiate a contract with them. You'll still get the final approval on the contract when we get it negotiated. It just saves us 3 months in the process.
Any questions?
How do we know it's not going to take 3 months to negotiate with Arcadis?
It will only take us a month.
Okay.
We might mention that Arcadis designed that plant initially, so they already have everything.
They have the background, yeah.
And we did go through an RFQ process for the original plant design, so.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? All right, I show that Mrs. Teener is your second, and you're asking for 2 readings.
That's correct.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise.
Next resolution is 104-20. This is a resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit an application for Round 35 grant funding to the Ohio Public Works Commission. This is for West 6th Avenue improvements coming through Public Works. Mr. Schoonover.
I'm going to have Mitch come up and discuss this a little bit.
Good evening. So this is the kind of a yearly thing we go after with OPWC applications, District 17. Our next focus street is 6th Avenue, the entire length from Cherry Street clear to Roosevelt. That is basically all an STP street except for the last little section there from Pierce to Roosevelt. But if we do an OPWC application, they don't look at things with STP dollars. We're trying to tackle a very long section of street that needs to be completed. And so this is the first section, and we're going to try to go after it with our OPWC dollars. We feel like it will score well. There are also some improvements that need to happen on the Hocking Bridge near the YMCA and Miller Park area, some maintenance type things on that bridge. So that is what we are submitting for this round of OPWC.
Who owns the bridge there?
We do.
Yes, Mr. Stoughton?
So you're submitting for just that piece?
From Memorial Drive all the way to Roosevelt.
Okay. And that, so what would you guess a project that size would?
We're probably looking around like a $700,000 project, maybe $600,000-700,000.
Don't we have a problem underneath part of,
Yeah.
and that includes that, or?
We're looking at that right now. There's some sections of curb, like the cross section of the street, at least on the north side. We're looking at that right now with how we're gonna mitigate that issue and try to raise that up, but that's part of our scope that we'll include within that.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
Does anybody else have any questions on this resolution? for Mitch? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Schoonover, I have Mr. James as your second, and you're asking for 3 readings.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Next resolution is 105-20. This is a resolution authorizing the Community Development Department to apply for funding from the U.S. Economic Development Administration Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. Coming through Economic Development, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, we discussed this at our most recent Economic Development Committee meeting. This is an opportunity to apply for funding to study the Ewing Street connector. Mr. Mayor, I don't know if someone from the administration would like to talk about this, give a little bit more detail. More community development.
So this is an opportunity through the CARES Act. Hello, good evening. This is an opportunity through the CARES Act, through the, it's the Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration. There is no set amount for these funds, and they are being distributed until they are used. So we've communicated with our MORPC, Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission. They've consulted with us on our application, and we've also talked with our representative in Chicago, our EDA representative. So this would be for funds for planning for the Ewing Street connector, this project. There was some planning done about 9 or 10 years ago. The project was put on hold and was never realized. So because of the time that's lapsed, we feel that another round of planning is in order, and these funds can be used for that, because it would be the ultimate project, the implementation project, whether it's a Ewing Street connector, whether it's a larger bypass. We're not sure exactly what it's going to look like, but we want to do some origin and destination studies for businesses that have trucks. We want to do an economic impact study, a cost-benefit analysis, those types of studies to really tell us, for this connector, what should we be looking at, today.
Okay.
In addition to, Linda mentioned MORPC, but this project is high on MORPC's list for possible development, or at least granting or funding.
Yes, it's a competitive advantage project, CAP, C-A-P. It's been on MORPC's list for a while.
So we have the support of MORPC, and it's an opportunity to get funding out of the CARES Act, and we'll be asking for suspension tonight, one reading, and Mrs. Downhour, if you would second that, please.
Sure will.
Thank
Okay,
you.
are there any other questions for this, on this resolution?
Oh.
Yes.
I did want to ask, I'm sorry, unless you mentioned it, I don't remember. It says require a cost-sharing match of 20%. So where will that be coming from?
We have a tentative match from the Port Authority.
Okay.
For that
Okay.
20%.
Okay, anything else? All right, great, thank you, Linda. Next is temporary resolution 106-20. This is a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor in the water pollution control fund. And this is to cover the cost of sludge removal in the tanks coming through water pollution control. Mr. James.
Yes, I'd like to yield some time to Superintendent Nixon to discuss this.
As members of the Finance Committee, this is an opportunity. It's finally been dry. We've finally been able to do land application of sewage sludge. And this is a project that would need to be done under the upcoming improvements to Lawrence Street anyway. So while the land is dry and we can get out on it, we have started cleaning out solids that have deposited in these tanks. These tanks have not been cleaned out since they were put in service back in 1988. The mixers have failed in these tanks with the back-to-back wet weather years. We've never been able to drain the tanks to get the mixers out to put new ones in. These mixers are submerged in 18 feet of sludge when the tanks are full. So we needed to get those out. So we dewatered what we could with our own equipment, and then we have brought in Agri-Sludge, who is our current contractor on the biosolids end, and they have cleaned out one of the tanks so far. This $200,000 number, I may have to come back later and get more. There's just no way of knowing when you're looking at a 103-foot diameter tank, 18 feet deep, exactly how much material is deposited in those tanks until we've literally pumped out what we can and then lowered a skid steer in, and they're scooping it up and bringing it out in a basically a big pan, and then dumping it in the truck and then weighing it, and then we're getting it land applied and paying the same cost that we always pay for our land application of sludge. When we looked at having this being done as part of the the Lawrence Street upgrade, Arcadis solicited a bid from a contractor, and it was about $1.5 million. So I'm thinking we're going to do it for somewhere in the $200,000 to $400,000 range ourselves. We proceeded with getting one tank empty. I've got mixers coming, and then we'll work on getting another tank empty and hoping having all three of them empty before the construction project starts. And the reason that is important is we're changing the technology on the mixers. These currently are submerged mixers. They're basically a big fan impeller type thing set on the bottom. So if your chain breaks or your cable breaks, you can't get them out. They're always submerged. So what we're going to put in is basically a header system on the bottom of the tank. It's similar to what we did at the Upper Hocking. We actually pull the sludge out of the tank with a pump on the outside and then shoot it back in the tank, and then there are orifices that help mix the tank. So all your moving equipment will now be outside the tank rather than inside the tank. So from a preventative maintenance, reactive maintenance situation, it's going to be a whole lot easier to maintain that mixing system. So again, if we can do 2 readings on this, hopefully in the next month to 2 months, we'll have a better idea of how much this is adding. These are solids that we'd have to ultimately get out anyway. So we're just getting them out quicker. And again, when the opportunity presents itself and we've got a couple months of dry weather, we're finally able to get out, get on fields, and get this stuff not only dewatered but land applied. So if you need any more explanation, let me know. But yes.
Will this help with the smell down on that side of town?
Well, unfortunately, wastewater plants stink.
I know they do, but
But yes, every less gallon of sludge we have in storage and every less ton of sludge we have dried that's sitting there, the more we can get on the fields and out of those tanks and off the pad, the less odor there'll be.
Thank you.
And if we can keep the prevailing wind west to east, that helps
Yeah,
a lot.
good luck with that one.
Yeah.
Can I also say, you know, if you could put it on the field near Beck's Knob, I know President Uhl has enjoyed those odors in the past.
We got
And-
plenty
and
of
all-
odor over there right now. We don't need any more odor.
And for all fairness to the city, that was not even biosolid
That's
sewage
true.
sludge. That was a farmer
That's the pig
cleaning
farm,
out
I
his
think.
barn.
Yeah.
So, we got blamed for it, and I got cussed out by a guy.
Not by me.
No.
No.
But no, that was not us, but we can cause odors, that's for sure, but that one didn't happen to be us. I'll take credit for a lot of other ones, but
Not that one. Got it.
Yes.
All right, does anybody have any other questions for Mr. Nixon? Mr. James, I have Mrs. Teener as your second, and, we're looking for 2 readings, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right. The next resolution is 107-20. This is a resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the LDOT Fund 2008 and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor. This is to cover the cost of right-of-way expansion for the widening of Lawrence Street and Maple Street intersections. Mr. Schoonover, coming through Public Works.
Excuse me.
I'm gonna have Greg Hens come up and speak to this.
Good evening. This is for the purchase of the property at the corner of Lawrence and Maple. It's been that's always an issue there with trucks turning and so on and so forth, and we got an opportunity to purchase at a pretty good price. So, the plan going forward in the near future is to widen that intersection to the point that it makes it a lot less hazardous for trucks making those turns, because there's a lot of trucks that run up and down that road. And it gets us away from the railroad, the rails too, so.
Is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
the house on
Yes.
the corner?
I think in your packet, I think you got a picture of the property that, it's right on the
I
corner.
thought it was. I just wanted to make sure it was the house. on the
It's the house and all the way to the alley.
corner. Okay, good.
Okay, so, and we will be demoing the property, once it's acquired.
As soon as possible, actually.
Yes.
Okay,
We might do the improvement a little bit, maybe first of next
The-
year.
The improvement's gonna be later on down the road. I've got utilities to get moved, and, but the house, everything falls into place. The house realistically could come down yet this year. And we will be doing that all in-house too.
okay. Does anybody have any questions for Greg? All
Thank
right.
you.
Corey, I have me as the second and 3 readings, is that right?
If you're okay with that.
I'm okay with that.
All right.
Okay, next resolution is 108-20, a resolution to accept and allocate funds, fiscal year 2020 City of Lancaster Community Development Block Grant. This resolution is to accept and allocate the CDBG fund totaling $504,000+ coming through economic development. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, I'm gonna ask Linda to discuss this one also.
This is the final step in our annual action plan for this year's Community Development Block Grant. I'm like so happy. It took so much to get here. I won't go into it all, but just to say that my first time doing an annual action plan, and now I have it. Anyway, so it's been approved. We came to you with the roster of grants that we were recommending, and HUD is concurring with that list, and they're ready to, we've signed the contract with your approval.
What's the total amount?
504,461 is what's in the
Yes,
resolution.
504,461.
It's nice to get it.
Just nice to get it out there, yes. And it's about a third for our in-house housing programs, our grants to homeowners for emergency home repairs and for rehab. About a third for businesses, small businesses receive grants to create jobs, and about a third to our public service agencies.
Great. Yes, Becky?
I want to thank Linda. She has found things that, she's just gone and looked for things, and she's found grants and ways that we could use monies that we didn't have before. So it's going to be a good thing for the city.
Thank you.
I want to echo that. Thank you also. Much appreciated. I know a lot of work goes into this, and it's fresh eyes looking at new opportunities. We appreciate that.
Mr. Hall?
Thank you.
Just real quickly, what's the trend in terms of our, you see those going up or going down, or staying about the same?
The trend has been funds going up. We've gotten more money for 2020 than we did for 2019, but I honestly don't know. So, yeah, I mean, if I get a sense of that, I'll let you know. Yeah.
Jack?
So just it used to be that we could get online and see these applications. So if a taxpayer wants to know what this business got their money for, you could read what their application said. And I'm wondering if that's gonna be possible still, or is that just because I had access, special access before?
I think you had special access before. I don't know that we published the applications.
Well, because at the fire department, we got grant money. And so I was able to access my application in the same place I could see everybody else's. I wasn't sure if that was a public information or not. Okay.
No.
So if there's a question about a certain place, why they got this money, we have to call you.
No, well, yes, but our annual action plan is open to the public. So anyone could call us for it, they could email me for it, they could come by our office for it, and the plan that we submitted to HUD that they've approved does detail,
Okay.
you know, who got what grants and why.
That
So-
might be what I've read before then.
Yeah.
That plan.
Right.
Thank you.
Tom?
Just to answer Orman's question, Orman, it's been pretty flat. Actually, at one point in my tenure here, we used to get about 600,000, and then it kind of dropped down to about 480, and I think we're getting a little more now because of maybe the COVID stuff. So it's been pretty flat, is probably the best way to say it, over the tenure that I've been sitting here.
That would have been sort of what I would have expected, but it seems to me that over the span of the next several years,
Yep.
it would be reasonable to expect that this is. That's helpful, thanks, Tom.
Okay. Any other questions?
Can I talk about the CD?
Mr. McDaniel, who is your second?
Well, I was going to ask Mr. Stoughton to do that, but I think you're probably going to abstain from this legislation, are you not?
I am.
Well,
So,
I'll
Mrs.
do it.
Downhour.
Make Holly do it.
And
Working overtime.
this is money that we need to allocate.
Suspension.
Yes,
Yep.
suspension.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Linda.
Thank you.
Okay, we now have a walk-in piece of legislation, temporary resolution 109-20. This is a resolution to increase receipts appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the local coronavirus relief fund, amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor. This resolution is to increase the revenue budget and expense budget to allow for the receipt of additional approved fund from the CARES Act. Auditor Nettles or Mayor Scheffler, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
This was additional monies, of course, that came down through, that was basically our second allotment. So the county auditor notified me a few weeks back saying that they would issue it to us once we spent our first round. And we gratefully got notification this past week of the ability to use more of those funds. So I immediately asked the county auditor to send it to us, and this is just accepting it, and so we can get those spent.
Okay, great. Don't type as fast as I used to. Okay, coming through finance, Mrs. Bobbitt is my second. We're doing two readings. I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
So I don't want anyone to think this is, a windfall. This is basically restoring some of the money we've lost along the COVID battle. We're still underwater from, tax collections into the general fund, but this certainly is a bit of a help. Is that
Correct.
Fair way to put it?
Our income tax collections are down something over $1 million, and it looks like this month so far, with only 2 days left, we're down, at least compared to last year, by another $400,000 or $500,000. So yes, this is money sorely needed to replace money that we haven't collected.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on resolution 109-20? All right, do we have any other resolutions to come before finance? No. Seeing none, we'll move to the ordinances for finance this evening. We have temporary ordinance 20-20. This is an ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes. This is an annual piece, and it is for the municipal court's 10-year notes for additional work on the Columbian building. They've paid down $180,000, and they have about 6 more years to go, totaling about $1,080,000. Any questions on that ordinance? You get to see it 6 more times after this. Yeah. So, Mr. Schutton, I have you as my second, and I have 3 readings. Temporary ordinance 21-20, this is an ordinance coming through Public Works to authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement to purchase approximately .14 acres. I think we talked about this a little bit earlier in the meeting under resolution 107-20. Mr. Schoonover.
This is just the mirrored ordinance to go along with that, resolution, so I think we're
Yep.
good on that.
And I have myself as the second and 3 readings.
Yep.
Okay, the next ordinance is, I'm sorry, Becky.
I do
go
have a
ahead.
question.
Yep.
With that, there at corner of Maple and Lawrence, will there have to be a public hearing or anything about that to widen that or to I mean, I didn't know. Oh, there you are.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I just was just checking. Okay.
All right, temporary ordinance 22-20, an ordinance regarding the dissolution of Lancaster Area Community Improvement Corporation, Lancaster CIC, and to declare an emergency. This ordinance is in regards to the dissolution of the Lancaster Area Community Improvement Corporation. We talked about this at a previous meeting. Coming through economic development, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, as you stated, we've talked about this at both council and at the Economic Development Committee meeting, probably for over a year now. The Community Improvement Corporation is looking to dissolve. It is dissolving. I'm not sure when that's gonna take effect. This legislation answers some questions that need to be answered on the legal side. I'm gonna ask Law Director Olin to discuss that for us.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. Yeah, this is basically a piece we're doing, one, because the CIC, of course, originated out of an ordinance in 1970 by this body. It then became a not-for-profit. I think it's done an exemplary job over the many years it's been in place to do what council wanted it to do for economic development purposes. But as you've all heard or whatever before, there's been, with the advent of the statutes with regard to port authorities, there's some more things, more flexibility the Port Authority can do for purposes of economic development than a CIC. And so it decided, to dissolve it. So this piece actually is just kind of, as Councilman McDaniel said, is going through the history of this. The other thing is that one of their assets and their assets and liabilities upon dissolution are going to transfer over to the Port Authority, but one of their liabilities is the agreement that we've dealt with here many times or several times over the years with regard to reimbursement to the city for infrastructure costs with the Rock Mill Industrial Park built out. And so that's an agreement. That agreement doesn't have any assignment or anything to it. So this is basically also you all authorizing, the termination of that agreement with the dissolution, in conjunction with the dissolution of the CIC. I did put something in here because I don't know this necessarily gonna happen, but in my conversation with Mr. Pettit, there's a possibility that some more acreage or whatever that would be subject to that agreement may be sold, and that agreement may be entered into by the CIC, but then ultimately sale does happen, my thought was it originated while the agreement was still in place, so that any reimbursement proceeds or whatever from that sale should still be subject to that agreement, so that language is in there.
Okay. Any other questions? Who's your second?
Mr. Stoughton, please.
All right. And I have 2 readings, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other ordinances to come before finance? Seeing none, we'll go to other discussion items. Mayor Scheffler, do you want to elaborate a little bit more on 109-20 and any other updates that you've got on the
Yes,
federal
so,
government?
as we have discussed before, Congress, through the CARES Act, established a coronavirus relief fund, which sent money out to states and local governments in Ohio. Any municipality or government entity that has over 500,000 of population got their funds directly. Obviously, we did not fall in that, so ours came through the state. Initially, they awarded $375 million, which we've already received. This second amount that's covered by Resolution 109-20 was actually allocated to the controlling board in the amount of $175 million was distributed, which is the controlling board's limit. The legislature recently passed a bill, passed both houses and is on the governor's desk. I've not heard that he signed it yet, to allocate the remaining funds sitting in there to the local governments. It goes first to the county, then they reallocate it out to municipalities. So hopefully the balance of the money due us will be received sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks, assuming the government signs it in the near future.
Okay. Any questions for the mayor? Okay. Do we have any other departmental updates this evening?
I intended to get this out to you guys earlier today, but just never got a chance. If you guys want to I'll just let you pass this around. This is just some documentation to follow up on what. So we are extremely busy in the engineer's office with a lot of private development. This is just one example of. We talk about trying to get money for inspection and stuff. We bring that money in when we do a public improvement for street, sewer, water. This one here is for Overlook, which is there right off the corner of Fair and Edie. You probably see the construction going on up there. So through the administration and through what you guys approve in my budget, I have about $50,000 in consultant line item for various tasks that I need, and that's either inspection or I need traffic impact studies reviewed through various developments. And what I'm asking for is if I run out of money or get close to run out of money in my consultant line item and I need additional inspection for street inspection, which would be for this project here, that I come to you guys and get that allocated and appropriated into my consultant line item budget. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on this. There's like a $23,000 line item there that was paid for through Rockford Homes that would be for street inspection, and that would be what I would be asking for. So only if I need it.
Any questions for Mitch? Before he takes off. Okay, thank you. Do we have any other departmental updates? Okay. The only question that we had left over from the last meeting, which I'll go ahead and bring up now, was the request for additional monies for, water pollution control. We were expecting an update on that. Do we have that update?
Is that legislation in here tonight?
Not for the finance agenda, but it is
Oh.
for the meeting. Are you gonna do it during the meeting?
We could. Denise was gonna give an update on that. We were talking today about it. So, which resolution is that?
That is.
Second reading is,
Is it 95-20?
No.
No.
Wait a minute, 95-20. I think it may be.
so I'm not sure why it's not here. Stephen introduced that last week, I thought, right?
Yes, he introduced it and he said he was going to get back with us on some specific details. It's a 102-20. It's for $120,000. Inspection services and general engineering for various projects within the city.
So I'm not sure why it's not in the agenda tonight.
It's not?
No, I don't see 102.
If I go to last week, look,
Did we table that?
No. It's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be. Wait a second. One oh
carried
two,
in.
are you sure it's 102?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was carried in last meeting.
yeah. It's 102-20.
Oh, was it the walk-in piece?
Here you go.
Yeah.
I might have misfired it here.
so, that being said, Denise, it's what you and I talked about. We were trying to figure out why it was pulled, and this was
Well-
probably about 3:30 when we were talking about this.
I apologize for the confusion. I didn't intend it to be walked in last meeting.
Oh,
But because I was on vacation, I was gonna miss Teresa's deadline for new legislation. So I submitted it early, and because there was one walk-in piece, all three of them ended up getting walked in. So I apologize, that's why you didn't know anything about it. What this is the second amendment to the Hull contract for general engineering and inspection. So you amended the contract in June, and we hoped there was gonna be enough money for the rest of the year. We ran into some other projects that required services. So the major portion is for Union Mulberry, which we knew about, but we didn't know that the contractor was gonna be putting in as many hours as they did over the summer. So our inspector was working 50 to 55 hours a week, and that was all overtime. So, a big chunk of the amendment is to pay the remaining money because I paid out overtime for the inspection services on that.
okay.
We had, a private development that, we did not have staff to do inspections because of, some illnesses and some medical reasons and one COVID case. So we had to have Hull come in and do inspection for sewer and stormwater on that. And then finally, after we did the amendment in June, there was a fire out at the, city property next to the mall. We went in and cleaned it up, but as part of that cleanup, I had to get a Corps of Engineers permit, which is kind of involved. And, we didn't have time to do it in-house, so we had to have Hull come in and do the, Corps permit application so that we could get a culvert in, so we could get equipment in to do that cleanup. So that's it, and Hull has guaranteed that this will last me till the end of the year. I know it's it's a lot of money. This was an unusual year for us, and it won't be this much next year.
What are we paying them an hourly rate?
The inspector
Yeah,
is $70 an hour.
and you mentioned that we did this on an overtime basis?
A lot of it was, anything over 40 became overtime.
Okay.
The project is now wrapping up, they're paving, so I shouldn't have any more surprises out there.
Well, that was my main concern. I just wanna make sure that you're gonna have enough
Mhm.
with since it's a second amendment.
Right.
That was what I brought up at the last meeting, was to make sure that you are gonna have enough so that you don't have to come back, because we're quickly running out of meetings.
Right.
here. So that was my main concern, and we wanted to just clarify what the 120 was.
Luckily, we're also running out of construction season.
Yes, okay, all right, thank you very much for clarifying.
Thank you.
Any other departmental updates? Okay, seeing none, I will turn it over to President Uhl for tonight's meeting prep.
All right, we have a couple of ordinances to address tonight. An ordinance to accept the final plat for the Overlook Section 2, this 1820 coming through code enforcement. Mr. Matlin.
Yeah, I was hoping Mr. Hall, I believe, could second that for me.
Okay, Mr. Hall can serve as the second, and you want to talk about it a little bit?
I don't have a lot of information other than this is just the extension of the overlook.
Okay, I saw Mitch
I'll see.
heading this way. You want to let him
Mitch,
come
wanna
up?
talk about it?
Not much to talk about, but it's, so this final plat came before Planning Commission several weeks ago, along with the next one that we'll be talking about here soon. Again, I believe they're starting, I believe they're working on water line right now. They're trying to get prepped for roadway work here soon, and trying to get everything in within the paving season here before winter gets us. And they're wanting to get things wrapped up so they can start selling lots. So that's the intent here. And we've kind of already talked about the overlook. It's over there at the corner of Fair and Edie, so. That's it.
Okay, any questions? I'm sorry.
Oh, you want to take it over? Oh, feel free.
Go ahead, I did it again.
Anyone have any questions, comments? If not, this will be 3 readings with Mr. Hall as the second then. All right, thank you. We also have temporary ordinance 19-20, an ordinance to accept the replat of the Wesley Woods subdivision Phase 2, again coming through code enforcement, Mr. Matlin.
And I was gonna ask Mr. Schoonover to second this. If you wanna talk about this one, seems kind of simple. They're just adjoining 2 lots so somebody can build a house in the center of it instead of being off to the side. I think it's,
Yeah, typically, we wouldn't have to go through this process if there was, if it was just 2 lots and there was nothing in the middle. The reason it caused this was, there was an actual dedicated drainage easement that ran between the lot lines here, so legally, they would be crossing over a drainage easement that was dedicated in the plat, so they eliminated that, at the same time eliminated a property line, joined the lots together. There's no public improvements happening here, it's just 2 lots basically getting pushed together, and they're, the reason for the 2 readings is they're trying to get, foundation started here soon, so that's why we're requesting the 2 readings on that, so.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this? So 2 readings on this with Mr. Schoonover serving as the second. Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Appreciate that. The only other things I'll mention quickly before I pass it back to the chairwoman is that obviously Ms. Bobbitt is out. There was a motion to excuse her here, and we'll take action to do so in the main meeting. We also need an executive session tonight. We're going to need to suspend the rules and go outside of the regular order of business and put it before the tabled legislation. So we'll do that, Mr. Schoonover, at that point. This has only been held for 1 reading, so we'll need to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading. The third reading, and then actually make a motion to pass if that's the pleasure of this council. Other than that, we'll pass it back to the chairwoman.
Thank you, President Uhl. Are there any other items to come before finance? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
I second it. Adjourn at 6:43.
The regular meeting of Lancaster City Council will begin at 6:50.
Mr. James, I do have one more for you to sign. I apologize.
There is no place like Lancaster, Ohio, and Fairfield County, and like you, I am proud to call them home. As a longtime resident of Lancaster and graduate of Lancaster High School, this community is important to me, and I want to provide superior customer service, professionalism, integrity, and honesty at the Connor Insurance Agency. I am committed to supporting local programs and projects through my volunteer work and board membership with several organizations. It has been a great honor to work with all the first responders throughout Lancaster, Fairfield County, and the state of Ohio to put on Kids and Cops Day, to be a part of Shop with a Cop alongside the Lancaster Police Department and JFS, and to help Lancaster Public Education Foundation raise funds to support our local public schools and teachers. These men and women work hard to protect and support our community, and I would like to take this moment to say thank you for all they do. My goal as a business owner and insurance agent is to provide my clients with the most appropriate services and coverage for their needs at a competitive rate. As an independent agent, I have several carriers to choose from so I can customize your insurance coverage to fit your needs and desires. I strive to make sure there are no gaps in your coverage that could be harmful, and just as important, that you are not overinsured. I look forward to serving your insurance needs now and in the future. At Connor Insurance, we are here to serve you by protecting what is important to you. Please contact my office at 740-654-2848 for a full list of services and carriers, or visit my website, ConnorInsuranceAgency.com.
Swing into the Carriage Company and check out our sweet deals.
If you're looking for the best selection of clean, quality used vehicles, look no further than the Carriage Company. You'll feel secure with your purchase, knowing all vehicles undergo an extensive safety and service check prior to the sale. And all vehicles can be viewed online at carriagecompany.com. The Carriage Company, located at 1031 North Memorial Drive in Lancaster.
Wait!
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
Good evening. Welcome to this meeting of Lancaster City Council. Please join me in a word of prayer. Father, we are grateful once again for all that you do for us and the many blessings which we enjoy. We ask that you would continue to be with us this day, continue to be with first responders and those who keep us safe, be with those who serve in the military around the world, who protect and defend and preserve our liberties and freedoms. May you bless this meeting tonight and each one of us. May you lead, guide, and direct us in the way you would have us to go as we work on the business set before us. We pray in Jesus' name, amen. I hereby call this meeting of Lancaster City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Bobbitt. Mrs. Downhour.
Here.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Mr. James.
Here.
Mr. Matlin.
Here.
Mr. McDaniel.
Here.
Mr. Schoonover.
Here.
Mr. Stoughton.
Here.
And Mrs. Teener.
Here.
Let the record reflect the 8 of 9 members of council are in attendance this evening. Mr. Stoughton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a motion that we excuse Mrs. Bobbitt this evening
I
from
second.
tonight's meeting.
We have a motion and a second to excuse Ms. Bobbitt from tonight's meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Ms. Bobbitt is excused. Reports of city officials.
I'd like to present the regular meeting minutes dated September 14th, 2020.
I said it wrong, but you did it right.
Oh, I'm such a...
I know. That's the reading and disposing of the journal, which has been presented.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the journal.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the journal. Discussion? Yeah, thanks for taking all those.
Yeah.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now, reports of city officials.
Email dated September 16th, 2020 regarding agenda for the Economic Development Committee submitted by Mr. McDaniel. Email dated September 16th, 2020 regarding call for resignation of Councilwoman Teener submitted by Mrs. Bobbitt. Email dated September 23rd, 2020 regarding August employment submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated September 23rd, 2020 regarding future tax collection submitted by Mayor David Scheffler. Email dated September 23rd regarding future tax collection submitted by Income Tax Commissioner Amy Hamilton. Email dated September 24th, 2020 regarding agenda for Safety Committee submitted by Mrs. Bobbitt. And finally, an email dated September 27th, 2020 regarding the agenda for Finance Committee submitted by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we receive and file the reports of city officials.
Second.
For a motion and a second to receive and file reports of city officials, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there any communications?
There are two. Email dated September 15th, 2020 regarding call for resignation of Councilwoman Teener submitted by Wendy Garbrandt. Email dated September 23rd regarding future tax collection submitted by Attorney Jennifer Sitterly.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the communications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file communications. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I think this special presentation and award is actually a holdover to the next meeting. Is that right? So we don't have anything this evening, but we will have a special award and presentation at our first meeting in October. Are there any petitions or memorials?
There are none to be presented.
At this time, City Council sets time aside to allow the voters and taxpayers of the City of Lancaster to address City Council on any item or issue they would like. If you are a voter or taxpayer of the city and would like to address City Council, please come forward to the podium. Sign in with your name and address at the clipboard and then state the same for the record. Please note that while members of council may choose to respond to you at a later time during the meeting, they will not engage with you during this particular time. In addition, in accordance with the rules of council, we ask that you would keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. With that, is there anyone who would like to address Lancaster City Council tonight? I see we have someone up there. Mr. Good, please go ahead and begin your comments.
I'm William Good. I live at 3137 Meister Road, Lancaster, Ohio. And I pay taxes in the school district, and I also pay taxes due to rental property that I have here in town.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
As a continuation of last board meeting or council meeting, I felt like I got rushed and my time was cut off. I want to point out that I'm not part of the instigators organizing committee, although I have frequently supported them. When it comes to violence, the instigators have adamantly called for nonviolence and not engaging with antagonists. Yet from the very first assembly they held in the Job and Family Services parking lot, they were met with armed vigilante groups, and I asked, is that not a form of violence? Multiple threats were made online and on social media, and I believe they have been reported to the Lancaster Police Department. That is violence as well. Does organizing and calling for diesel trucks to come by demonstrations and rev their engines to create clouds of black diesel fumes to smoke demonstrators, and burning your tires reckless around corners like the incident that left the tire mark around the corner of Main and Broad. The tire mark is still here and can be seen today. That is violence. Does throwing a roast beef sandwich at demonstrators constitute violence? Yes, yes it does. Flipping your finger and yelling racial slurs, that is violence. For 12 weeks over the summer, this was the escalating conduct of violence which led the instigators to a virtual format. On the following 3 weeks, I did go to the Fountain Square. The first week I went because there were a number of high school-aged kids who had taken no forethought for their own safety, the dangers of the environment they were in, or the legalities that could arise. The same happened the following 2 weeks. I encouraged people to not be there, escorted some people that would have been likely targets of violence to their cars, and encouraged them to go home. At the last council meeting, I shared evidence of a number of incidences, and that violence is still continuing. The night after our last council meeting, there was an individual that turned the car sprayer for the windshield wiper so that it sprayed people on the sidewalk instead of their windshield. That individual was videotaped. The video was sent to the police along with a blown up of the license plate number, and by the time I got to the police department to file the report, they had also identified the person's name. So I have not heard back on any reports of charges actually being filed on that case. The following week, some people threw bottles of water at people standing on the sidewalk from their car. And so the violence is continuing. And at the last council meeting, I shared evidence of a number of extremist groups that have or are trying to infiltrate our community. Be aware that when these groups present themselves, they are often using these events as recruitment opportunities. Likewise, they are recruiting our youth on college campuses, in high schools, and increasingly through the internet. I asked the city council to stand against these groups by one, making a public statement, as our mayor has already done, denouncing these groups and making it loud and clear that there is no question that hate is not welcome in Lancaster. I asked the city council to educate yourselves about these groups so that you can at least differentiate between Proud Boys and our county sheriff. I've taught such classes on multiple occasions to various groups and would be willing to present council members either in person or through virtual meeting. And by the way, if you see a group of men wearing Hawaiian shirts and carrying assault rifles downtown, they're not parrot heads. And so if you don't know what I'm referencing, that's evidence of your not being informed about some of these groups. So I'd also recommend organizing a committee of elected officials and citizen representatives from the minority community to address issues of racism and xenophobia, and how our local community can address those issues. There are a number of communities that have gone through similar processes and have been successful. It's not like we would have to reinvent the wheel. If the city council would be interested, we can provide some of those resources about steps that other cities and communities have taken to eliminate these groups in their community. In 2009, I spoke to council because of the number of Confederate flags I was seeing in Lancaster, as well as Patriot Front stickers that we found downtown. And today, I'm seeing more Confederate flags around our community. And maybe this is because we haven't taken any action against these racist groups. They feel more emboldened than ever. And so I asked the city council to consider taking some action to alleviate some of these racist and hate groups in our community.
Sir, your time has expired. expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just mention briefly as the next person comes, sir, you signed in, right, Mr. Good?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that your time was cut off, and I think what you meant is your time expired at 5 minutes at the last meeting.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here. Have a good day. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Jamie Brown. I live at 527 Goodwin Avenue. Tonight, I am speaking on behalf of the instigators, and I'm going to set the tone for the next few speakers. We thought it would be appropriate and beneficial to establish a timeline. As many folks around town, as well as some folks here on the council, seem to misunderstand the chronology of events that, as they pertain to our organization. Our first demonstration was back in June on the 6th. That was a Saturday. We continued to demonstrate for 5 consecutive days following that initial demonstration. And then on June 10th and then the 11th, 2 episodes occurred that required police involvement, one ending in the arrest of a passerby who assaulted a member of our group's demonstration. These instances of aggression led us to stand down for the daily demonstrations to reevaluate our strategy moving forward for the safety of our group. That is when we began our weekly Righteous Wednesday demonstrations. That's back in June. Still, counter-protesters and antagonizers pressured us in attempts to get us to leave and retreat and to go home. These interactions escalated to a point that Park Supervisor Mark Tharp Jr. reached out to our group to secure a permit that would attempt to protect us from these invasive posturing aggressions. This had little effect as police officers were summoned, but they frequently deemed the aggression to be lawful conduct. The instigators demonstrated for 11 weeks with a nonviolent, intentionally non-engaging strategy. We read weekly the Peace and White Privilege that we shared with each of you, as well as played songs, speeches, poems, all from Black thought leaders about our role as white allies in this cultural moment. Each week, the aggressions grew. Racist epithets, assaults ending in arrest, diesel smoke and reckless driving, workplace harassment, menacing threats online and in person, stalking our homes and invading our space, both in public, private, and downtown. We understand and continue to understand that the police have a limited ability in matters such as these, but we did plead on several occasions for help, assistance, and surveillance, as we believe that if there was no mitigation to these aggressions, they would turn violent and the situation would become more volatile. After 11 weeks of our nonviolent protest, word got out about the abuse our group was enduring. I assure you, we sought no outside assistance. We sought no outside assistance, but nonetheless, on August 12th, 2 Black Lives Matter protesters from Columbus came to our demonstration because they had heard and were concerned about our mistreatments. They were here for less than 10 minutes when they were called vile, racist epithets and threatened with physical violence themselves. As urban organizers, they were surprised by Lancaster's brand of racism, and they insisted they had never seen that kind of racism in person, only in movies and documentaries. They were outraged, and so they felt empowered to take their bodies to the other side of the road. We have said and will continue to say that crossing the road was not productive. We understand the volatility of rural Ohio, but they did not. Obviously know that that turned violent immediately. This is the episode that many citizens believe was the beginning of demonstrations in the city. Please excuse the air quotes, but I use them to emphasize the travesty and misunderstanding of many citizens' perception of our timeline. We stood for 11 weeks enduring assault, verbal abuse, smoking diesel burnouts, our Black comrades withstanding racist epithets, many of us dealing with workplace harassment, menacing threats, stalking in the middle of a pandemic where aggressors often ignored mask protocols and disregarded our concerns for public safety. For 11 weeks, we stood nonviolently, non-engaging, socially distancing, providing masks and sanitizer to the best of our ability, reading speeches on white privilege, playing lectures, poems, and songs from Martin Luther King, James Baldwin, Dr. Cornel West, and other nonviolent Black thought leaders about our role as white allies. 11 weeks, nonviolent. 11 weeks, non-engaging. 11 weeks. That's nearly 3 months. The town only paid attention when things got violent. I can't explain it in 5-minute allotments, but this posture is indicative of the very notions of white privilege we speak about at our demonstrations. Predominantly white privilege, predominantly white communities struggle to have serious conversations about race and white privilege because they're uncomfortable and put off by the subject. Our moniker has been no more silence, justice now, instigate. It is our hope that each of you is beginning to understand our tongue-in-cheek approach to instigation, why we chose the name in the first place. 11 weeks of nonviolence and crickets. No one wanted to talk to us until things got violent. think we're living in volatile times, and I hope that you heed this warning. Thank you, council, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there anyone else who would like to address Lancaster City Council this evening? Yes, ma'am. Just to be clear, you guys are signing in, right?
Yes,
I know he
signed
stepped
in.
out, but he signed in. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Wren.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Renner. I live at 527 Goodwin Avenue here in Lancaster. I vote and pay taxes here. Last meeting, several citizens addressed the council about some concerns of Councilperson Teener's implicit support of bad faith actors in and around our community. We commend your show of camaraderie as a council in meeting her call to defend her character, but to reiterate, it was never our intent to question the councilperson's character or love for our community. Our intent was to hold an elected official accountable for her mistakes. A good leader recognizes mistakes. While we affirm the council's defense of Councilperson Teener's intentions, it does not change the reality that she missed the mark in the execution of her actions. So today we are here to solicit an apology for the following three things: her revocation of white privilege, which was clearly reactionary and not rooted in a deep understanding of the concept. As we mentioned previously, we have shared information on this topic, and we have not heard Ms. Teener speak to any attempt to learn more or be open to learning more on the subject. Her irresponsible and hurtful comment, "I didn't take a stick of welfare," which implicitly demonized welfare recipients and further complicates the social welfare of people living in poverty in our community. Going downtown after the specific advice of our own chief of police asking people not to go downtown on Wednesday. While we accept the narrative of her intention was to investigate happenings on the ground, she only stood on one side. She did this twice. And this action has led to the armed extremists and bigots to vocally declare her as an ally for their cause. Not speaking to this social dynamic is explicitly complacent, which emboldens bad faith actors to continue to perpetuate lies, threats, and propaganda that further complicate the difficult work of racial justice in our community. An old proverb says, "Mistakes have the power to turn you into something better than you were before." We all make mistakes, but likewise, we should all be held accountable for them. If nothing else comes from this solicitation, we have one simple, earnest plea. Councilperson Teener, please publicly condemn the neo-fascist group, the Proud Boys, and any local group that supports them. Councilperson Teener, we trust you mean the best for the city. We believe in your spirited work to make Lancaster safe for everyone. We believe you did not wittingly engage with these bad actors, but they nonetheless view your engagement with them as support. They are publicly vocal about it. Please rebuke this support. To the rest of the council, the Proud Boys are in our city. The picture that's being passed around is them standing proudly at our fountain and our Veterans Park, many of them displaying the white power hand gesture. We encourage each and every one of you to publicly condemn all hate groups, bigotry, and all forms of violent rhetoric. Thank you, council, for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Renner. Is there anyone else who would like to address City Council? If you'll just state your name and address for the record and ensure you signed in after your comments, ma'am.
I am Caitlin Lansinger. I live at 516 Busby Avenue here in Lancaster. I vote and pay taxes here as well. In my life as a young mixed woman thus far, I've been subjected to ridiculous amounts of racism, despite how light-skinned I am. The most recent occurrence, outside of all the protests, was when I worked at Harbor Freight here in Lancaster last year. A man approached the checkout counter and exclaimed that he wanted someone else to check him out, and proceeded to call me racial slurs and derogatory homophobic slurs. I calmly told him that I was the only person on the register, and he asked to speak to my manager. I got my manager and went to the back, because I had zero interest in exchanging anything else with that man. And turns out my manager found someone white to serve this customer and gave him what he wanted. That's unacceptable. We should not be catering to racist people and allowing their racism to be so blatantly present and still get what they want. We have to speak out against these people and educate them to be better. Most will not care what you say, and most will never change. It's important to speak up regardless. When a child does something wrong, you correct them, and you do not let them do as they please. Staying quiet and allowing them to do as they please makes us a part of the problem. These people are confident in being racist here in our town and are only reassured when they aren't scolded. Councilperson Becky Teener, catered to the Patriots and the Proud Boys by standing with them. Regardless of whether or not her intentions were to see what's going on downtown, she condoned what they were doing by standing on their side. From first glance, it looks like support. As we know, the Patriots and Proud Boys saw it as support, and it looked that way to us. As stated by others, the intent of this statement is not to discuss Ms. Teener's character, but rather educate her and request an apology. Thank you for your time this evening, Council.
Thank you, ma'am.
I did sign in, by the way.
I'm sorry.
I did sign in, by the way.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
I did sign in.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Miranda Kane. I live in the 6th Ward at 527 Goodwin Avenue, and I pay taxes to Lancaster. I'm not going to talk very long because I know all of you want to get this meeting over with. I just want to say that I've lived here for over a year now, and I want to leave. Coming from Morgan County, Ohio, I was very excited to come to a bigger city where things would be more diverse and I would get to experience new things. All that I've seen since I got here is hate. My own city council representative says, stop with the white privilege crap, like it's not a real issue. I see young people standing up for what they believe in, getting shouted at and threatened by racists and bigots. And along with them, I see hate groups carrying around assault weapons in areas that I wish were safe. If I want to leave, I can't imagine that I'm the only one who feels this way. I believe that Lancaster can do better. Thank you, City Council.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else who'd like to address City Council this evening? All right, well, thank you all for being here tonight. Are there reports of standing committees?
There are 3. Finance Committee meeting dated September 14th, 2020, submitted by Mrs. Downhour. Economic Development meeting dated May 21st, 2020, submitted by Mr. McDaniel. And finally, the Water Pollution Control meeting dated September 9th, 2020, submitted by Mr. James.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the reports of standing committees.
Second.
A motion and a second to receive and file reports of standing committees. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Are there reports of special committees?
There are none to be presented.
We have no public hearings this evening, so we'll move to the reading of resolutions. Before we do so, let me just note that as we work through the reading of resolutions, we will be adding in Resolution 102-20, which was inadvertently missed from tonight's agenda, and we'll be voting on that, or we'll be considering that for second reading when it comes up. With that, we have third reading of temporary Resolution 93-20.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit an application to participate in the Ohio Public Works Commission State Capital Improvement Program and to execute contracts as required. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James.
I will yield some time to Denise Cruz to discuss this a little bit. We've been through this whole resolution for quite a bit, so hopefully tonight, any questions, we can get them resolved.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. This is for the State Capital Improvement Program, and this is for the CSO 1029 project, which is on Fetters Run at 6th Avenue at the bridge across from Lanrico. We submitted this application last year as our number 2 application and just missed getting funded. This year it's going in as our number 1 application, which gives us 5 more points, so we're very hopeful that it will be funded this year. Regardless, we need to start construction on this project next year as part of our long-term control plan and Ohio EPA compliance.
Thank you very much. Mr. James?
At this point in time, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon a written record resolution temporarily numbered 93-20.
Second.
We have a motion and second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 93-20. Discussion, Mr. James?
No more at this time.
Any discussion on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 93-20 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 95-20.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance, amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor in the wastewater utility reserve fund 6029, and authorize the issuance of any then and now certificates needed for the purchase of this property. Offered by Mr. James and seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James?
Yes, I'd like to yield some time to Superintendent Nixon to discuss this.
Yes, this property is adjacent to the wastewater treatment plant. You probably have heard the story by now. is really the last piece that we need to secure so that we will own everything from Lawrence Street to the north, the bike path to the west, the Hocking River to the south, and Baldwin Run to the east. Initially, we don't need it for our next project, but in the future, they likely will. So we'll be sharing this land with the transit company as the fuel depot area has become very congested. They're looking for more space. They are trying to get more space from us. We don't have it to give. It doesn't mean in the future we may have to tell them to look for something else if we need to put structures on that property, but it at least allows the city then to have the final piece in that corner. We have made the property owner aware that any and all leases need to be terminated, as we're not in the real estate business, and all junk from inside and outside those structures need to be removed. And if you've driven down past there prior to us buying it, it is pretty much a junkyard with a lot of stuff. We've had a environmental phase 1 done on it. We haven't seen the results, but as I walked around with the Hall and Associate professional the 2 days that we were down there inside and out of buildings, we really didn't see any noticeable issues. So we don't believe there will be anything. But before the city would move forward and get a contract and take possession of the buildings, the owners are very much aware that everybody needs to be out and all the junk needs to be out. And we're not going to assume the liability of any of that. So with that, I don't have anything else to offer.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Mr. James?
Is there any other questions from anyone? If not, at this time, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon this written record, resolution temporarily numbered 95-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 95-20. Discussion, Mr. James.
Nothing further.
Discussion or questions on the motion to pass? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downauer,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 95-20 passes 8-0. We're gonna have second reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 97-20.
A resolution authorizing the law director to negotiate and enter into a contract with the city of Pickerington for prosecution of cases arising from criminal and other offenses that occur in the city of Pickerington within Fairfield County, Ohio, and to accept payment. Offered by Mrs. Downauer, second by Mrs. Bobbitt.
Ms. Downauer.
Second and 3 readings, please.
Second to 3 readings on temporary resolution 97-20, temporary resolution 98-20.
A resolution authorizing the law director to negotiate and enter into a contract with the city of Reynoldsburg for prosecution of cases arising from criminal and other offenses that occur in the city of Reynoldsburg within Fairfield County, Ohio, and to accept payment. Offered by Mrs. Downauer, second by Mr. Stoughton.
Ms. Downauer.
Second and 3 readings, please.
Second to 3 readings on temporary resolution 98-20, temporary resolution 99-20.
A resolution scheduling Lancaster City Council meetings for 2021, offered by Mr. Hall, second by Mr. McDaniel.
Mr. Hall.
2 of 3, please.
Second to 3 readings on temporary resolution 99-20, temporary resolution 102-20.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to enter into an engineering contract amendment for additional construction services, offered by Mr. James, seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James.
We've discussed this in the Finance Committee meeting. This will be the first of 2 readings.
No, sir, we're going to suspend on this tonight.
I'm sorry, yes, we are.
Go ahead.
Mr. President, at this time, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 100-20.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 102-20. Further discussion, Mr. James?
Nothing at this time.
Okay. Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downauer,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mr. James?
The only comment I'll make before we go ahead and a motion to pass is that it makes sense for us to start to look at increasing the capacity of this particular facility to help our economic development continue. So at this time, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution numbered 100-20.
Second.
I'm sorry.
We're
Oh,
doing 102.
102, I'm
102.
sorry. 102-20.
This is an inspection service contract.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got mine mixed up, sorry.
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, so we're on 102-20.
102-20.
We've had a motion to suspend. This is the motion to pass. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 102-20. Further discussion, Mr. James.
Nothing at this time?
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 102-20 passes 8-0. We now have first reading on a series of resolutions, beginning with temporary resolution 100-20.
A resolution to authorize the Service Safety Director to waive the request for qualifications and negotiated contract for planning and design of the expansion of the Upper Hocking Water Pollution Control Facility and related sewers and pump stations, and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. James, seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James?
Yes, as I said, before I got confused about what I was doing, this is to help look at increasing that capacity of that particular facility to certainly support our continued economic development. This will be the first two readings.
First two readings on temporary resolution 100-20, temporary resolution 104-20.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to prepare and submit an application for Round 35 grant funding to the Ohio Public Works Commission, offered by Mr. Schoonover, seconded by Mr. James.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yeah, this piece, it'll be the first of three readings, just a little background for it. We're applying for a grant to do some road improvement on West 6th Avenue from Memorial Drive to Roosevelt. So 10 or 11 blocks of street that would be greatly appreciated to be paved if we can get this grant.
Very good. Further discussion? What's your pleasure, Mr. Schoonover?
Three readings, please.
First of three readings on temporary resolution 104-20, temporary resolution 105-20.
A resolution authorizing the Community Development Department to apply for funding from the U.S. Economic Development Administration, Economic Adjustment Assistance Program, offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion the council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporary numbered 105-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 105-20. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel?
Yes, we discussed this earlier regarding the CARES Act recovery opportunity we might have. This is a grant that we would hope would fund the Ewing Street Connector, I guess, study to see if we can make that happen at some time in the future.
Very good. What's your pleasure?
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council pass.
Oh, we got to vote. I'm sorry. I got
Oh,
excited.
yes.
We start talking about a bypass around 33. I get excited about this. We've been talking about this for decades.
Yes, we need to vote on the other one, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we're voting now on the motion to suspend. Further discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mr. McDaniel.
We'll try this again. Mr. President, I would like to make a motion the council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporary number 105-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 105-20. Further discussion, Mr. McDaniel?
Nothing else.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour.
Yes.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Mr. James.
Yes.
Mr. Matlin.
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover.
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton.
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 105-20 passes 8-0. Temporary resolution 106-20.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor and the Water Pollution Control Fund 6004, offered by Mr. James, seconded by Mrs. Teener.
Mr. James?
I'll yield some time to Superintendent, and we've already discussed it in the finance meeting, but Superintendent Nixon can add a few things if he needs to.
Okay, thank you, Councilman James. This is, again, an appropriation of an additional $200,000 for the sludge removal from some storage tanks that we've had at the facility. This is being done in anticipation of the upcoming improvements to the Lawrence Street facility. And we are paying a fee of roughly $45,000 to have the material removed from the tank to be hauled, and then we are paying our contracted rate per dry ton to be then spread out on farm fields in Fairfield County for fertilizing purposes. So again, 2 readings on this, and we hope the weather stays relatively dry and we can continue processing and getting this stuff land applied and be ready for the improvement project and not have any delays getting the new mixing systems installed.
Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Mr. James,
Any other questions? I have nothing further to add.
what's your pleasure?
This will be the first of 2 readings.
First of 2 readings on temporary resolution 106-20, temporary resolution 107-20.
A resolution to appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the LDOT Fund 2008 and to amend the certificate of appropriations with the county auditor, offered by Mr. Schoonover, seconded by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. Schoonover,
First of 3 readings, please.
first of 3 readings on 107-20, temporary resolution 108-20.
A resolution to accept and allocate funds FY 2020 City of Lancaster Community Development Block Grant Program, offered by Mr. McDaniel, seconded by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of resolution temporarily numbered 108-20.
Second.
A motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading, temporary resolution 108-20. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Nothing at this time.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record resolution temporarily numbered 108-20.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record, temporary resolution 108-20. Discussion, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes, Mr. President, this is our Community Development Block Grant Program. This is allowing us to allocate the funds and expend them, and a lot of work went into this. We've already previously approved the plan. This is just allowing that to proceed and these programs to be funded.
Very good. Further discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Abstain.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary resolution 108-20 passes 7-0 with 1 abstention. And let me just echo the thanks that we heard during finance to Ms. Disser and to her team. I've been on Economic Development Committee. I know how much work goes into this, and I believe it was her first one of these as she went through the process. So congratulations to her and her team as they moved forward. And we're excited to be able to get this money. A little over $500,000 is the amount, so that's a good thing. We'll move on to temporary resolution 109-20.
A resolution to increase receipts, appropriate from the unencumbered balance in the local coronavirus relief fund 2050, amend the certificate of other sources and appropriations with the county auditor, offered by Mrs. Downhour, second by Mrs. Bobbitt.
Ms. Downhour.
First of 2 readings, please.
First of 2 readings on temporary resolution 109-20. Oh, is that it? Any further resolutions to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, we'll move to the reading of ordinances, beginning with temporary ordinance 17-20.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement to purchase approximately 0.982 acres, more or less, of real property identified as parcel number 0535023192, offered by Mr. James, seconded by Mr. Hall.
Mr. James.
Yes, we've actually discussed this in relation to the land that's adjacent to the Lawrence Street wastewater treatment plant. And at this point in time, Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass and gross and enter upon a written record ordinance temporarily numbered 17-20.
Second. We have a motion and a second to pass and gross and enter upon the written record temporary ordinance 17-20. Discussion? Mr. James?
I have nothing further at this time.
Discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary ordinance 17-20 passes 8-0. We'll have first reading on a series of resolutions, or ordinances, beginning with temporary ordinance 18-20.
An ordinance to accept the final plat for Overlook Section 2, offered by Mr. Matlin, second by Mr. Hall.
Mr. Matlin.
First of three readings.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 18-20, temporary ordinance 19-20.
An ordinance to accept the replat of Wesley Woods subdivision, Phase 2, offered by Mr. Matlin, seconded by Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. Matlin.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary ordinance 19-20, temporary ordinance 20-20.
An ordinance providing for the issuance and sale of notes in the maximum principal amount of $1,080,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying the cost of renovations of an existing building for the city's municipal court, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and declaring an emergency, offered by Mrs. Downhour, second by Mr. Stoughton.
Mrs. Downhour.
First of three readings, please.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 20-20, temporary ordinance 21-20.
An ordinance to authorize the mayor to enter into an agreement to purchase approximately 0.14 acres, more or less, of real property identified as parcel number 0535118000 from Wayne A. Hedges and Lorena J. Hedges, offered by Mr. Schoonover, second by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. Schoonover.
First of three readings, please.
First of three readings on temporary ordinance 21-20, temporary ordinance 22-20.
An ordinance regarding the dissolution of the Lancaster Area Community Improvement Corporation, Lancaster CIC, and to declare an emergency, offered by Mr. McDaniel, second by Mr. Stoughton.
Mr. McDaniel.
First of two readings.
First of two readings on temporary ordinance 22-20. Are there further ordinances to come before Lancaster City Council this evening? If not, Ms. Downhour.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to go outside the regular order of business.
Second.
A motion to suspend the rules and go outside of the regular order of business. We need roll call vote for this? I always forget.
Voice vote.
We gotta do voice vote on this one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Please call the roll.
just a,
Oh, just a voice vote?
just a voice vote.
I wanna call the roll. I'm kidding. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are outside of the regular order of business.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion for City Council to convene into executive session to consider confidential information related to the marketing plan, specific business strategy, production techniques, trade secrets, or personal financial statements of an applicant for economic development assistance involving public infrastructure improvements, and that this executive session is necessary to protect the interest of the applicant or the possible investment or expenditure of public funds to be made in connection with the economic development project pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22G8. The executive session should include the following: Finance Chairwoman, members of the Finance Committee, whoops, I opened the wrong one. All members of council, law director, council president, mayor, auditor, service safety director, treasurer, city engineer, and city engineer.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to go into executive session to do all of that, which will be printed in the minutes and available to anyone who wants to look at it. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour,
Yes.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
Mr. Matlin,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover,
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton,
Yes.
and Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to go into executive session passes 8-0. We are now in executive session. We do expect there to be business and action after this executive session, and we will return momentarily.
There is no place like Lancaster, Ohio, and Fairfield County, and like you, I am proud to call them home. As a longtime resident of Lancaster and graduate of Lancaster High School, this community is important to me, and I want to provide superior customer service, professionalism, integrity, and honesty at the Connor Insurance Agency. I am committed to supporting local programs and projects through my volunteer work and board membership with several organizations. It has been a great honor to work with all the first responders throughout Lancaster, Fairfield County, and the state of Ohio to put on Kids and Cops Day, to be a part of Shop with a Cop alongside the Lancaster Police Department and JFS, and to help Lancaster Public Education Foundation raise funds to support our local public schools and teachers. These men and women work hard to protect and support our community, and I would like to take this moment to say thank you for all they do. My goal as a business owner and insurance agent is to provide my clients with the most appropriate services and coverage for their needs at a competitive rate. As an independent agent, I have several carriers to choose from so I can customize your insurance coverage to fit your needs and desires. I strive to make sure there are no gaps in your coverage that could be harmful, and just as important, that you are not overinsured. I look forward to serving your insurance needs now and in the future. At Connor Insurance, we are here to serve you by protecting what is important to you. Please contact my office at 740-654-2848 for a full list of services and carriers, or visit my website, ConnorInsuranceAgency.com.
Swing into the Carriage Company and check out our sweet deals.
If you're looking for the best selection of clean, quality used vehicles, look no further than the Carriage Company. You'll feel secure with your purchase, knowing all vehicles undergo an extensive safety and service check prior to the sale. And all vehicles can be viewed online at carriagecompany.com. The Carriage Company, located at 1031 North Memorial Drive in Lancaster.
Wait!
The Frankie Smith Funeral Home and Crematory in Lancaster and the Johnson Smith Funeral Home in Baltimore have a long and wonderful history of serving our community. Feel free to give us a call at 740-653-0652. Stop in and see us at either of our two locations, 405 North Columbus Street in Lancaster and 207 South Main Street in Baltimore. Respect for tradition, regard for change.
You wanna sign it just in case?
Yeah, make a motion.
It's not going anywhere. It won't go anywhere unless it passes, so.
When we return to regular order, we need another
Roll call, yes. Well, a roll call.
We back in?
To come out of executive session, but not to return
It's
to the regular order.
frozen in here. What happened?
Yes. Well, no,
No, I think we can just
no,
go
we
back to
just
the
do the
regular.
regular,
Order of business?
out of executive session, isn't it, Tom? I thought we had to go out of come out of executive session to return the regular order of business, all in one. Because we've had to do a roll call to go in and come out.
No, you made a roll call to go in, and then we're going to basically return.
Hold on a second. We suspended the rules.
We're back.
We went into executive session.
We're back.
Yeah,
So you want to go
We're
to the
back.
regular order, back to the regular order of business, and then you want to go back to the regular. You want to return, you want
How
to
many times
return,
have we
then go back to the she's right.
I'm coming out of that executive session. Okay.
return to the regular order of business.
Yes, and then you want to go back to
Yes.
the regular.
That's my
order of
motion here,
business.
that we've used all in the past, to make a motion to return to the regular order of business.
And then we're fine because we're
Back
in
into
the
where we're
regular
supposed to
order.
be.
Yeah, we don't need to second.
Yes, I'm so sorry, I was thinking.
It's okay.
So
And
that's
that's a
all we
roll
need.
call vote.
That's a roll call vote.
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to return to the regular order of business.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to return to the regular order of business. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to return to the regular order of business passes 8-0. We are now back to the regular order of business, and we are to the point in our agenda where we will consider tabled legislation. Is there any activity or action on tabled legislation tonight? Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council remove from the table temporary resolution 70-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to take from the table temporary resolution 70-20. This motion is not debatable. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to take from the table passes 8-0. We now have before us temporary resolution 70-20. Mr. Schoonover.
Oh, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 70-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the second and third reading of temporary resolution 70-20. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover?
Wait.
We've only read it once. We didn't have plans for the clerk to read it as we took it from the table. We can, and then we can just do two, but since he did 2 and 3, we don't have to read it, right, if we suspend 2 and 3?
You need to read it.
Read it. Read it.
It's not gonna get you home any quicker, so.
I'm not going home tonight. We're all staying here all night.
While you're reading it, what are we?
Sure, let's have the clerk read the preamble.
A resolution to enter into an LPA agreement with LDOT for an ODOT LET project, offered by Mr. Schoonover, second by Mrs. Downhour.
Mr. Schoonover, would you like to make a motion to suspend the third reading now?
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that council suspend its rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 70-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules and waive the third reading of temporary resolution 70-20. Should have stayed home tonight. I almost did. I was gonna make you do all this.
Really?
Yeah.
You make me do all of it, huh?
Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
No, sir.
Discussion on the motion to suspend. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Motion to suspend passes 8-0. Mr. Schoonover.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion that council pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 70-20.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to pass, engross, and enter upon the written record temporary resolution 70-20. Discussion, Mr. Schoonover.
Just quickly, this is for, us to enter an agreement with ODOT so we can purchase some small parcels out there off of Edie Road so we can continue our expansion of that section. That's all I got.
That's all he's got. Other discussion on the motion to pass. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Downhour?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Mr. Matlin?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Schoonover?
Yes.
Mr. Stoughton?
Yes.
And Mrs. Teener.
Yes.
Temporary Resolution 70-20 passes 8-0. Is there any further action on tabled legislation tonight? Yes. Ms.
Yes, I'd spoken to Mr. Thurp today about 4520, and Olivedale is up and running, at least at minimal level that the state permits right now. So we do, maybe the next meeting we'll be able to take this off the table and pass it, because they are getting busier and they're going to open up more, have more people coming in at Olivedale.
Thank you for that update, Ms. Teener. Any other action on tabled legislation? I'll just mention that the income tax piece is missing from the agenda. It is still on the table. It'll be added back in to the agenda for our next meeting. Is there unfinished business this evening? Is there new business this evening? Yes, Mr. Mallett.
I know we've had a long meeting, but I want to say one thing, and Mr. Hintz left. We talked at a meeting, I think months ago, about the little speed limit signs on East Main Street, in front of the racks, like the 700 block, I think it is, and I tell you, I like it. I drive Main Street several times a day, and when you're coming up on those and the sign comes up and it says slow down, I see brake lights come on, and it reminds people that that's still a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. So just a quick note, attaboy for the street department, whoever put those up.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to point out. Those, they do work, surprisingly enough, and I think we need some on Fair Avenue, out the racetrack as well, so maybe we can work on that. Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Matlin. Anyone else?
Yeah, just to add to that, so those are movable. They're not stationary, so they were two signs that we bought to try it out on Main Street, because we had a citizen that complained about Main Street, of course, being a drag strip, which it is. So very excited to see those up, and they are going to look at putting them in different spots across the city and possibly getting more of them, so.
Great.
Yeah, it was good.
You know what they cost a pop?
2,100?
I feel like it was something like that.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
we discussed it in the last Public Works meeting, so I think it was $2,100 a pop.
That's great.
2,100 or 2,500.
And I imagine they're more effective as you move them around and don't keep them stationary in any one place, just a guess, but people probably get used to them otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay, yes, Mr. Hall.
Yes, my voice is getting raspy, I apologize for that, but we had citizens tonight voice serious concerns about the personal safety. They also mentioned that the mayor had made a comment about his concerns regarding hate groups operating in our community. I think we should consider in one of our upcoming meetings affirming the mayor's statement. And I also think that it would be helpful for us to hear from our chief of police about any observations he may have about hate groups operating in within the city limits of Lancaster.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thank you.
Further new business this evening? All right, we'll ask the clerk then to read our announcement of scheduled meetings.
The next two meetings, October 12th, the meeting following October 26th, both 6:30 PM here in council chambers. Upcoming committee meetings for the next 30 days. Service, October 2nd at 7:30 AM. City Hall 1897 Conference Room. Code Enforcement and Zoning, October 5th at 8 AM at the City Hall 1897 Conference Room. Public Works, October 9th at 7:30 AM at Transit, which I will probably be moving to the 1897 room possibly.
We may have a transit, because they're done with their renovation
Okay.
remodel, so
All right, just checking.
I'll let you know.
Finance, October 12th at 6 PM, council chambers here. Water Pollution Control, October 14th, 8 AM at the Water Pollution Control Conference Room, unless I hear from Mr. James to move it.
1897.
Okay, that will be at the 1897 room. If it's available, I'll check on that tomorrow. Law Committee, October 14th at 9:30 AM at the Fairfield County Municipal Court Community Room. And finally, Finance, October 26th at 6 PM here in council chambers.
Thank you very much. Are there any bills?
There are none to be presented.
We already had an executive session. Certainly, there's not a need for another one, right? Excellent. Mr. Schoonover, I see you ready to
I'm ready.
gain the floor there.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a great night.
Hey, how hard would it be for me to move a
Thank you.